Thanks. Thank you. It's great to be here. I knew Herb at the Post for years, and one of the kind of indoctrination courses for reporters at the Post, you would be there and Herb would come into the newsroom, kind of shuffle in and have a couple of cartoon kind of preliminary drawings of possible cartoons, and sometimes he would pick you and say, look at this, what do you think? And it was an honor, and everyone looked forward to it. And I remember going through cartoons, and I would think, okay, Herb is interested in what I have to say in my analysis. And so I would go through and say, oh yeah, this cartoon and that cartoon, and kind of give my reaction orally. And it took me a couple of years to realize he was not the first to do this, to blank out what I was saying. What he was doing is looking at my face to see what the reaction was and to see what kind of struck a chord. And of course, that's the cartoonist. He's sending a message that is not oral. My good friend Paul Richard, who was the art critic at the Post, I think going back to the Calvin Coolidge administration, wasn't it? Used to always say, what matters is the visual. And that really is true. And Herb proved it time and time again. And what I've done, he did 140 cartoons during Watergate, so I thought we could stay here for 2.5 hours and show them all. Picked out 47 that we're going to zip through and kind of pick out some of the elements and why it worked, and also take what was going on in secret in the Nixon White House, what was said, as we later learned, on the Nixon tapes, and then recounting a little bit of the reporting we were doing at the same time at the Washington Post. So there is the interaction of these three forces. Wanted to start with the first cartoon. This is before Watergate, 1971. And it depicts John Connally, who was Nixon's Treasury Secretary. Nixon truly loved Connally. And here you see what Herb has done. Connally had said something about, he's really not trying to get close to power at all. Of course, he'd been an aide for John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. And the cartoon ran on April 28th, 1971. Through the magic of the Nixon tape system, the next day, it turns out, and that Nixon and Connally were on the phone. And the Nellie that's referred to is Connally's wife, and we've got the audio. This is not a real great Apollo rig that Nixon had in his Oval Office or on his telephones, but let's play the tape of this.
And the other thing that made me think you'd really come across is that son of a bitch Herb Block finally took notice of you. Didn't you enjoy it, though? Let me tell you this. If Nellie worries, tell her that Herb Block took me on 23 years ago in his case, and he's been against me ever since. And when he took you on, I said, by God, Connolly's my man.
So this was a real love fest, and I was shocked to hear what Nixon had to say about Herb. And I don't know that this tape came out while Herb was still around or not. But then let's go to the next. This is one of Herb's cartoon, August 3rd, 72, about 6 weeks after the Watergate burglary. And Carl Bernstein and I had done a story about this $25,000 campaign check that had gone through the bank account of one of the Watergate burglars, the first time really establishing a link between Nixon money and the burglary. And Herb captures it perfectly. You see that the white pillar here suggests this activity might be going on at the White House. He has, again, the elements of the bugging of the Democratic headquarters, satchels of money, and then back in the left upper you see that he's got the public showing shock at what had occurred. Now next, this is just a few weeks later, and the dark at the top of the stairs. And at this moment, Herb realized that the investigations into Watergate were not going to go forward, that it was the whole Nixon presence and way of operating that would try to deter all of this. In one of the tapes at this time, and the audio's so bad we're not going to play it, Nixon and Haldeman are in the Oval Office, and they're talking about money and this $25,000 check. And Haldeman informs Nixon, well, it wasn't just for this operation, Watergate. It was for other stuff. And Nixon says, oh, I see. And this is, of course, Watergate, not just is the break-in into the Democratic headquarters, but it's all of the other stuff and the activities. Next cartoon is September 8th, and this is classic Herb. He's not exactly giving Nixon a break here. And he's got all of Maurice stands with his, we reported on the $350,000 in cash in Stan's safe, and he's there. John Mitchell and Kleindienst, who was the Attorney General at the time, Nixon with all this money, and they're walking around in circles. Now, many years later, I was at a university with Ben Bradley, the executive editor of the Post, and we were talking about Watergate, and Ben was saying, you know, the 5 Watergate burglars were caught, and they had $100 bills in their pockets, sophisticated electronic bugging equipment and photographic equipment, and they were wearing masks. And I said, Ben, they weren't wearing masks. And he said, I'm sure they were wearing masks. And I said, you got that from Herb. And so Herb knew exactly how to take, and for Bradley ever since said, I'm sure they were wearing masks. Not. Next. Okay, now this is, they've indicted the hirelings, the 5 Watergate burglars, Howard Hunt and Gordon Liddy, who were the operational commanders. And here, in Herb's very subtle way, has a few skeletons in the closet trying to get out. And who is holding it back? None other than Nixon himself. And then you see, again, Herb with that instinct of where this might be going, that the investigations have a certain, yeah, maybe they'll be bought off with that bone, but they are serious and going to go forward. Next is, again, this is Mitchell, Nixon, Kleindienst, the Attorney General, Maurice Stans, at night hauling it off to the river, the investigations. And what's powerful about this is it's at night, it's secret, they're burying the truth, and there is a kind of gleefulness on the faces of all of these people. Herb captured it. Next is, now at this point, Carl Bernstein and I had written stories about Watergate just being part of a series of sabotage and espionage operations run by the White House and the Nixon Re-election Committee, and also identified Nixon's appointment secretary, Dwight Chapin, very close to Nixon, as running this gang of dirty tricksters out of the White House. And the day after we did this story, Ron Ziegler came after us, Bob Dole, who was the Republican National Committee chairman, campaign manager there is Clark McGregor, gave a whole speech denouncing the Washington Post and Bradley and alleging that all of this reporting was politically motivated. And of course, they wouldn't answer any questions. And Herb realized that the absence of answers was quite significant, and thus this cartoon. Next. Now, this is about a week before the re-election, where Nixon is running against George McGovern, which is one of the things that Nixon engineered with his sabotage and spying operation. And here the polls show Nixon's going to clean up, going to win, and then Herb is able to show here what shaky ground this is on, not just the list of faked letters and political espionage and sabotage, but the very foundation of justice is going over the cliff here. Next. This is a magnificent cartoon because Nixon is the front runner. He's got that smug look, and then Herb is saying, but this corruption issue is stalking you, and you can't get away from that shadow. Nixon won re-election the next time. So Herb laid off for a while. The next, and so this is after a number of months after Nixon won a landslide re-election, 49 states, and the trial of the 5 Watergate burglars and Howard Hunt and Gordon Liddy, and the prosecutor presented at the trial his argument that Gordon Liddy was the mastermind of Watergate. No one higher up was involved. And so here Herb depicts all of these defendants totally ignorant. Where'd they get the money? Who hired them? You know, what? Me worry? And that's exactly what happened in this trial. Next, again, it's this theme of you can't get to the top, and that they convicted, or the underlings pleaded guilty, and what's keeping you from getting to the top? Yes, the administration, but also the stairway is littered with cash and bags and the usual paraphernalia that Herb always put in a Nixon cartoon. Next. Next is, this is L. Patrick Gray in the cop's uniform. He was the acting director of the FBI, and he was nominated to be the FBI director, the permanent director. And at the hearings, he took the position that, well, there's a presumption of regularity. This is the White House, so nothing would ever go on with these highly placed gentlemen. And you see there we have the cop looking in on, and it's the White House gang, it's secret funds, it's John Mitchell, and it's Bob Haldeman. Next. Now, this is the tape, which we didn't know about at the time, but it was secretly recorded, and it is John Dean, the White House counsel, asking, where are we going to get the money to buy the silence of all of these people? Let's play the audio. Again, it's not perfect, it's not like your stereo at home, but you can get the idea.
I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next few years.
You, on the money, if you need the money, I mean, you can get the money.
Well, I think that's where...
What I meant is, you could get $1 million, and you could get it in cash. I know where it could be gotten. I mean, it's not easy, but it could be done.
Now, here's the President of the United States saying, I know where we can get $1 million in cash to pay these guys off and not tell the truth. So no one knows about this. It's all secretly recorded. No one knows about the tape system. Next, 4 days later, Herb's gentle cartoon. And it's, taking the position of, people are criticizing Nixon, and that's Haldeman with him, and, we're safe. And then James McCord, who was the lead Watergate burglar, had written a letter to Judge Sirica saying there was perjury, higher-ups were involved. The whole ITT case, which was a payoff for the convention, and so forth. And again, there's this avalanche about to come, according to Herb. Next. And Gordon Liddy, taking the fall, and he got 6 to 20 years, and Nixon got 4 more years. And, I mean, if anything ever captured what was going on at that moment, it is this cartoon. Next. And then, again, this is April 73. Things are starting to unravel in the White House, but we don't know it. And Herb has Nixon on the Republican elephant, and the Republican elephant is getting messed up, and Nixon is above it all for the moment. Next is, now this, on April 17th, the day before, Nixon went public and made a statement, gave a kind of a little speech saying, oh, wait a minute, there are major developments in Watergate, things I did not know about. And Herb, again, in the simple way of the tide coming in of the, there it is, it's eating away at the White House. Next, 2 days later, so here is Herb saying, oh, we're not quite buying all of this shock. And there's Nixon, and what he did during this period is present himself as the aggressive, neutral investigator of all these things that all these people who worked for him had done. Next. This is Herb. That's him in the chair. It's a self-portrait, and to capture the magnitude, and there were times during this period when we'd have 4 or 5 Watergate stories on the front page. Next. This is the 11th month of the cover-up, and Nixon has just let go his 2 top aides, Haldeman and Nixon, Haldeman and Ehrlichman, and said in a speech to the nation that he had to let these guys go, but they're two of the finest public servants he'd ever known. And again, it's the money, you can't hold this back. And with that special ability Herb had to find the soft tissue in somebody he was depicting, he puts the bust of Abraham Lincoln in the cartoon, drawing the contrast with Nixon holding things back. Next. Then again, this is, that's Herb in his bathrobe, and able to kind of put himself in the shoes of the average person following the news. The Senate Watergate hearings had begun at this point. Next is then the day before this, on May 22nd, 73, Nixon issued a statement saying, these new developments are, there was, somebody was trying to limit the scope of the investigation and so forth, and it was not selling. And the next one is here, because on April 17th, he said, there are new developments. On April 30th, he said 2 of the finest public servants are being fired. And then he had the May 22nd explanations of, national security was involved, and all of these lifeboats that are there to save Nixon are sinking. Next. I have this on our bathroom wall. No words. No words. And there it is. There is Nixon clinging to the desk. The tide is coming in. The hurricane has struck, and the doors are coming off. The furniture is floating. And he captured it right there. Did not need any words. Next one is July 4th. And this was important. This, again, Nixon's trying to keep everything, Watergate, from coming out. And it turned out that it was open season on Nixon now for the Congress and anyone investigating. They investigated his tax write-off for his vice presidential papers, and it was a $230,000 tax write-off that was disallowed. Turned out lots of money from the taxpayers went to improve San Clemente, his home in California. And what has happened at this point, and what Herb captured, is it's not just Watergate, it's not just the money, it's just not what the plumbers were doing, which was this group in the White House who broke into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office. But that the moral authority of Nixon is eroding, that it's not just one thing, it's multiple things. Next is, then this again, move over, we can't stay in a holding pattern forever. Other words, the chickens are coming home to roost right on the White House. And it's again all the fund scandal, ITT scandal, the San Clemente improvements, which was one of Herb's favorites. And the whole thing is, you can't sweep it away. He makes that point. Next one. And so 2 weeks before this, it was disclosed that Nixon had this secret taping system. He refused to turn the tapes over to anyone investigating, but his former chief of staff, Bob Haldeman, could take him home to listen to. I guess, and again, this captures the absurdity of all of this. Let's keep going. We're going to have to go faster, or I'm going to... okay, same theme. Ehrlichman, Nixon, Haldeman, keeping the lid on. Next one. Judge Sirica has ruled that Nixon, in the district trial court, Nixon has to turn over his tapes. And Herb immediately spots that this is the sword of Damocles hanging over the White House. Next to September 7th, Big Brother. It's the bugging. There were 17 taps on newspaper reporters and so forth. Carl and I had done a story about Nixon had the telephone of his renegade brother, Donald, tapped by the Secret Service. Now, you know that's what the Secret Service is there for. And Herb immediately grasped the absurdity of the Secret Service that's there to protect being used as another intelligence gathering agency. Next. Again, this is what's so great about this cartoon is the Nixon scandals is actually Nixon, and that it is just looming over him and there's no excuse. Next. Nixon decided to turn over voluntarily 8 of his secret tape recordings and kind of hoped that would solve the problem. Of course, it did nothing of the kind. Next. If anyone recall what happened in October 1973, in fact, October 20th, 73? Yeah, Nixon fired the special prosecutor, Archibald Cox. And then again, the prosecutor's dead, and Nixon just doesn't have a gun. They're chortling, and they, of course, have their required bags of cash. Next. This is Operation Candor, which totally blew apart they were saying, we're coming clean with everything. Turned out there was an 18-and-a-half-minute gap on the tapes, and tapes were missing. And Barry Goldwater, the senator from Arizona, kind of the conscience of the Republican Party, publicly in an interview talked about Nixon and said, well, the only thing I think of is that old story, would you buy a used car from Dick Nixon? Not the Republicans at this point are starting to desert Nixon. Next. This is the erase tape, and Herb realizes that the whole fate of Nixon and the Nixon presidency rests on these tapes again. And here it is. The tape is leading Nixon. Next. And this is about the tapes, and let's kind of pass through this one because the audio is not very good, but one of the great mysteries even to this day about Watergate is why Nixon had the tapes and kept them. And in 1973, he's telling Haldeman, we've had these discussions. I don't want it to be part of the record. And you listen to enough of this stuff on the tapes, you realize Nixon thought he had immunity. No one was ever going to find out about the secret tapes, let alone get them. Next. Again, Herb reminding Nixon he's been 5 years there as president, but the 18.5 minutes, the erase tape, is going to define things. Next. Here we have streaking, which was fashionable at the time. And you see here's a naked Nixon going through, one part of the cover-up. This didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. And now there are impeachment proceedings and investigations beginning. Next. Again, it's Nixon sitting on the evidence. Now he's got the trifecta of the Senate Watergate Committee, the special prosecutor, a new one has been appointed, Leon Jaworski, and the House impeachment inquiry. And that's what is against him, and he's still trying to sit on the evidence. Next. This is one of the most brilliant cartoons ever done. I have it not just in the bathroom, but by the side of my bed. I mean, it says it's out of Nixon's hands. He's lost control, and time is running out. And he's trapped in this hourglass. Next. These are all the problems, Easter eggs for the Easter egg roll on the White House. They're supposed to be hidden, but they're out in the open, and they smell. And so it's all in plain sight. Next. This is, Nixon telling the Republicans who are kind of rebelling at this point, and he's saying, loyalty is to me, not the Constitution. Next. Nixon decided in not turning over the tapes, he would and make transcripts himself and edit them. And he put these, some of you may recall, he gave a nationally televised speech, and he had all these blue books stacked them. He said, this is the true story, this is everything. And it took about 5 minutes for it to be established that he cut things out. And here it is, the edited partial transcripts aren't flying, and he's caught up in the tapes. Next. This is... some of the tapes are leaking out that had been turned over earlier, and we started doing stories that there were things on the tapes that Nixon said, which we have a tape of. Now, St. Clair and Bazart are Nixon's lawyers. Haig was the chief of staff, who was a 4-star general, and Ron Ziegler, the spokesman, and my assistant, Evelyn, who's 27 years old, said, why in a Herb Block cartoon every time there's Ziegler, does he have musketeer ears on? And I said it turned out he was a tour guide at Disneyland before he went to work for Nixon. And Herb wouldn't let go of it. Next. Oh, this is Nixon and some of his anti-Semitic remarks and so forth. I mean, it was just... do we have that tape real quick? See if we can play.
I sure do. Second most Jews are disloyal. You know what I mean? You have a Garment and a Kissinger. And frankly, a Sadler. And by God, there are exceptions. But Bob, generally speaking, you can't trust the veterans. They turn on you.
Yeah, I mean, shocking. Okay, next. Speaks for itself. Next. And then it's 2 years of Watergate, and Nixon's burning things, kind of hoping that it's going to go away. Next. This is one of the most haunting of the cartoons. I mean, we did a story disclosing that secretly the grand jury had indicted Nixon as called him an unindicted co-conspirator, and all of these people have been found guilty or pled guilty, and it is the haunted Nixon at the table. Next. Supreme Court ruled the day before that Nixon had to turn over his tapes 8-0, and Herb said it simply. Equal justice under the law, 8. Nixon's claim of absolute privilege, 0. Next. Then the final tape was, a group of tapes were disclosed, and Nixon resigned. And Ben Bradley, the editor of the Post, always said at this time, and he was quite right, said no gloating. And Herb found a way to do a cartoon without Nixon in it. And there is the hand of the United States, the Constitution, the system, laws, forcing that resignation. Real quickly, we're going to go back now. We have now this. These were at the beginning of Watergate. This is June 20th, 1972. 3 days after the Watergate burglar, Carl and I are chasing around trying to find out the connection between Howard Hunt and Charles Colson and obscure things. And this is Herb's cartoon with Nixon, Kleindienst, the Attorney General, and Mitchell feigning shock. Who would think of doing such a thing? 3 days after Watergate, Herb told us. The next day, the next cartoon, is June 23rd, 72. This is 6 days after Watergate. Katharine Graham, in her memoir, writes on page 463 that the day before she went down to the newsroom and Herb showed her that cartoon. And she said to him, "You're not going to print that, are you?" And as she said many times and says in her memoirs, no one censored her block. And that we ran that cartoon, and everything leads to the White House. It turns out that this is the day of the final tape in which Nixon shows, and you can go to it real quickly, we won't. Haldeman says we have to get the CIA to limit the FBI investigation. And these are the words that Nixon says, let's play it tough, let's do it. He approves it. Always the question pulsing through all of this work Herb did is, who was Nixon? And the plots, the attitudes, the disdain for accountability, the smear tactics, the lawlessness. And if you listen to enough of these tapes and you realize that Nixon thought of the power of the presidency to essentially use it as an instrument of revenge. And if you go through enough of the transcripts and the tapes, and this happened a couple of years ago to me, you realize that the dog that doesn't bark on the Nixon tapes, no one ever says, Nixon, his close aides, what would be right? What does the country need? It was always about Nixon, using the power of the IRS, the CIA, the FBI to settle a score. And the former director of the Nixon Library, Tim Neftali, Carl and I were talking to recently, and he said in the 5 years he was there, they had a office pool, because they were going through all of the rest of the tapes, and they said, anyone will get a giant reward in dinner who can find anything on the Nixon tapes where somebody says, let's do the right thing. No one ever got the dinner. If you look at this, what it's all about is kind of Nixon's view, the disfiguring power of the presidency and political power, to use it all for himself and personal gain. And the day he resigned, he called all of his aides to the East Room of the White House, cabinet, and Nixon had no script, and if any of you have seen this, it was televised live, and there's a tape of it. Nixon was sweating, lamenting about his mother and what the poor lemon ranch his father had. He was almost coming unglued on national television, and then he kind of waved his hand as if, this is why I called you all here together. And he said the following: always remember, Others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself. And think of the wisdom in that. Right out of Nixon's mouth, it was the hating that destroyed him, and that we'll never know the full answer of where the genius and the instinct came from Herb to realize that that's what Nixon was about. Thanks very much.